Thank you, Christine. Challenges, what's gone surprisingly well since we've all been working from home?
Mm. So do you want us to get started, Alex?
Yeah, I think if folks can keep putting these things in as they think of them, I have a feeling that, especially for our employers who are sharing, we may end up coming back to some of these concerns later in the agenda when we're talking about what does it mean to be in the COVID workforce right now. And I don't know, Lee, do you want to start with at least one thing that you're excited and that has been going surprisingly well for you at CCV before we dive into the presentation?
Sure. Well, let me introduce myself. I'm Lee Marthy, and I'm one of the academic coordinators at the Community College of Vermont in the southeast corner. Had an interesting little woohoo moment with my team. We do work both in Brattleboro and Springfield, and recognized yesterday that our campus with enrollment is the third largest enrollment in the state. So for those of you who don't know, CCV is all over the state within a 30-minute drive of most people. And Brattleboro, when I arrived there 5 years ago, had one of the smaller we considered ourselves a small campus, and now within our region we're actually the third largest in the state this fall, and have watched our enrollment go up once again. We're at about 113% of where we were last year. So the things that have gone surprisingly well for us in the midst of primarily going online for classes is that what it means for our students is that they can take a class that they couldn't take if it were taught in Winooski, and now are taking a class that's taught from that Winooski campus, and are able to take advantage of science and math and other courses that they maybe couldn't take because we didn't have a large enough population in this part of the state. So it's a bonus for us. And like many of you, I've been working from home since March, and I am in some ways really sad not to see my colleagues every day, but it's nice to be able to connect with people from all over the state and region in face-to-face ways that I wouldn't see all of you probably even on a monthly basis. So it's good to see you all here today.
Great, thank you, Lee. And that is, some optimistic and hopeful news where it's hard to find these days, that students are finding the right opportunities locally at CCV. So that's great. Without further ado, I wanted to start with some happy news, because I don't know if our next presentation will be all that happy news. But I'm pleased to welcome Kevin Stapleton from the Labor Market Information Department at Vermont Department of Labor, who has an update and a presentation that I think some folks here have seen, but we're excited to see more of here. So Kevin, I think you should be able to share.
So can everybody hear me okay? Am I good? Let me share the proper screen here so you don't see my fantasy baseball league. Let's see, this is it. Let me share that. So ideally, you're seeing a screen right now that says COVID and Beyond, the Vermont Economy and the Impact of the Pandemic. Good. So welcome, everyone. I feel like I've been around this job and around the state long enough that I recognize about half of you from previous presentations and meetings and whatnot. It's great to see everyone. I hope you're all handling this whole situation as well as you can. Alex sort of gave away the obvious in that I probably don't have great news for you. But there are some improvement. So we'll take the next few minutes to I'll share with you some information about the economy, about what has happened so far, and then a little bit about where we think things are headed. Although, as it says right there in my first slide, I'll put this on play. As it says right there in my first slide, I'm not an epidemiologist, so I cannot predict really where all of this is headed, because that is the purview of epidemiologists. I have lost in showing this presentation. I can no longer see anyone, so please don't hesitate at any point during this presentation just to chime in with a question. I won't be. You could raise your hand, but I'm not going to see it. So please don't hesitate at all. If you've seen me present before, there's nothing I like more than when other people are talking. So feel free to chime in. But just for some quick starters, most of you might know this already, but my division in the Department of Labor is called the Economic and Labor Market Information Division. We are state partners to the federal government. Our primary partner in the federal government is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This is typically where I ask a raise of hands question of how many people have ever been to the BLS website. And usually I get blank stares, but amongst this crew, probably not. But of course, I can't see any hands. We are funded large part by the BLS, but also by the Employment and Training Administration. And the Employment and Training Administration funds our outreach work, our going out in the community and talking about it. If it was up to BLS, we would never leave our virtual cubicles. So Employment and Training pays us to do things like today. So thanks to them for this presentation. You can either thank them or send them nastygrams afterwards if you don't enjoy the presentation. Anyway, our job is to basically to go around the state, is to produce the data and then go around the state and talk about it. And this job, for the past several years, we've been telling the same, ever since basically July of 2009, we had been telling the exact same story, that the economy is slowly getting better, that it's improving, that we are nearing full employment. And then all of a sudden, obviously, things changed dramatically, starting back in February or March. So what I want to do today is address two things at once. One of those is looking at what has happened since the pandemic. But before we do that, I also think it's worthwhile to note that once the pandemic has passed, and we're not sure which decade that will be in, but once the pandemic has passed, these basic problems that Vermont faces will still be there. And especially in southern Vermont, there's a really strong concern about the labor force and about the size of the labor force and about populations and about trying to convince young people to come live in Vermont and all of that. And that conversation will continue after the pandemic. So just a really quick look, we made this visual, actually before the pandemic started, I created this visual of trying to make some graphics for understanding what has happened with the labor force. So before we go any further, the labor force is defined as all of the people who are employed plus all of the people who are unemployed, who meet the definition of unemployed. And the definition of unemployed is a person who is not currently working, but has actively sought work and would accept a job in the past 4 weeks. So you combine those two and you get this data point called the labor force. And this is an important data point because it basically tells you how many, if a business is trying to move into an area, this is the pool of people you have to choose from when you're trying to hire. So if we go back and we look at starting in the year 2000, in the graphic I'm about to show you, we start in the year 2000 and it will move through up to 2018. And as things become more blue, As a county becomes more blue, that is the county gaining labor force relative to 2000. And as it becomes more red, that is the county losing labor force relative to the year 2000. And there's sort of a story that gets told here. First, we'll watch the first decade of the new millennium. And you can see 2002, 2003, you get some areas slightly darker blue, some areas a little bit more red, but not too much is happening in the first half prior to the Great Recession. You see, right as the Great Recession sets in there, we stop at 2010 here, right as the Great Recession sets in, you see that the easternmost counties and Rutland County are starting to lose a little bit, and it's starting to get, the labor force growth is starting to get concentrated in the greater Burlington area, basically Franklin and Chittenden counties. That's those two northeast counties there, or northwest counties, I'm sorry. As you watch the second millennia, or the second decade progress, you will see that the picture changes pretty dramatically. By 2013 or 14, you start to see some deep red up in the eastern counties. And by 2018, the entire southern part of the state has lost a significant amount of its labor force. In the case of the southern part of the state there, it's a loss of, I think, of about 12%. And then up in the northeast corner there, that's a loss of about 16%. So when we talk about wanting jobs, wanting incomes to increase, wanting people to have opportunities, you need a growing labor force to meet those demands. It is hard to improve the overall standard of living of people when the labor force is getting smaller, because of the smaller share of people who are available to generate income. I'm gonna take this off for just a second and ask, before we go any further, does anyone have questions on that? You know, Alex is probably thinking, my gosh, does Kevin ever have anything new under the sun to say? He's heard that a lot. Susie, is your hand up, or is that?
Yeah. Sorry. I'm wondering if with that data, how much of that can be pulled of people leaving the labor force due to aging out of the labor force, maybe retirement, and how much can be really attributed to losing some of our young people who are moving out of state?
So that's a great question. So part of the decline in labor force is actually due to population declines. The populations in some of these counties is smaller than it was 20 years ago. So if you have a smaller population, everything else being equal, we have a smaller labor force. The aging of the population is a big factor here. People moving out of labor force age into retirement and not being replaced by young people entering the labor force. There's not as many, the cohort of people who should be entering the labor force right now, the 18 to 24-year-olds is much smaller than the cohort that is retiring at the other end. That is not actually a migration problem. That's a fertility rate problem. That's people having fewer children. Basically, my parents' generation, there were a whole lot of them. That's the baby boomers. My generation didn't have many kids, and we've created, and thanks to us, we've created this situation where there's not the incoming labor force is smaller. So you can blame me not just for the data, but also for the lack of children. And that problem, when you approach it, when you understand that the basic problem is a long-term demographic population problem, the solutions are challenging because we can't, it takes 18 years at least to fix the lack of children problem, right? And it's probably not going to, that's not how we're going to solve this puzzle. We need something more creative than, well, people who live in southern Vermont just need to have more children. So then you get into this discussion about the migration of people. in and out of the labor force. This is where I stopped long enough to apologize, because I realize everybody has all these fancy backgrounds and nice pictures out their window, and I'm in my basement. But that's where I've been working for the past while. So anyway, so the demographic problem that we're starting with here, the migration of people in and out of the state is a very small piece of that. And we can't even really get, it's very hard to get, and so far we've never found really sound numbers on how many young people are leaving the state, how many young people are entering the state. You can find all sorts of people who have very strong claims about that. But mainly it's driven by a meme that that's what's happening in the state. There's not a whole lot of data actually to support any strong claims about that. So one of the things that we talk about a lot around our office is that if you spend all of your time telling young people that all the young people are leaving the state, then the young people are going to leave the state. Like, why would you stay if all you ever hear is that young people are leaving the state and that it's too expensive to live here? Part of what we need to do to encourage young people to come here and to stay here is to convince people that actually you want to be here, right? And that's marketing, but it's also basic economic development policy. Any other questions on this little piece before I move on to the more sort of immediate concerns? Okay, I'm going to go back to play from current slide. Can everyone see that again? Alex, can you say yes if you can see that?
Yep, yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. Okay, so looking at the current pandemic, the pandemic economy, it's kind of impossible to figure out exactly what people want to see here. There's no good news to be had. What I'm going to try to do is just present some context around what has happened. Starting with unemployment insurance claims. If you look at claims back in February, I don't know if people can see my cursor. Can you see my cursor moving around?
Yep.
Okay, so February 29th was, I know this is hard to imagine, but this is pre-pandemic. We were talking about it, but it wasn't impacting us much yet. And you can see that any given February, we run 4,000, 5,000 unemployment insurance claims. Pretty typically, we have 4,000 or 5,000 people in Vermont who are collecting what we call continued claims in a good economy. It varies, but call it 3,000 to 6,000 any given time. By the end of March, we start to see the uptick in in initial claims, but also in continued claims. And then by the end of April, there are 75,000 claims filed, continued claims in the state of Vermont. And that is probably an underestimate, and not by a little bit, because you might remember that the unemployment insurance program had some troubles keeping up with claims, to put it mildly. So this is just what actually got counted in that time frame. 75,000 is about 25% of the labor force for the entire state, just under 25%. So about 25% of the people in the state who were either working or actively seeking work, basically, about 25% of them were filing a claim with the unemployment insurance department by April. That number has trailed off substantially. You can look at it by sector, which we'll do next here. And I know this is kind of like a wall of data, which for some people is scary, and for other people, this is your jam. If this chart is your jam, then you should come work for us. But what you can see here is that in construction, construction always has a lot of claims in March, but you can see that we had about 1,800 claims in March, and then by Early April, that number was up to about 6,000, which is about 3 or 4 times its typical number. And now it is actually back down to, well, as of August 15th, is back down to a somewhat normal number. Even though the total number of construction jobs is way down, the number of claims is returning to normal. Probably the more disturbing ones are retail trade, where in March there were 320, and that number went up by almost 2,000%, up to about 5,000 in April, and now it's still very, very high at about 2,200. And then the last one I'll point out here is accommodation and food service. These are numbers that I don't think anyone ever imagined they would see. Typical March, you start to get in March, you start to get the first flood of ski layoffs and all that. So 595 on March 14th was not the least bit surprising. 11,000 by April 11th is off the charts, obviously. And that number is still very, very high at about 6,500. Any questions on that data before I move to the next piece? So I'm going to change which screen I am sharing here. I have to figure out how to do that. Let's see, share screen. I'm going to move to CES data, where, let's see, this should do it. Hold on just 1 second. Sorry for these delays. This is, yeah. So you should be seeing a web page. Are people seeing that now?
Yep.
Good. This is, whoops, well, this is our website being slow, but this tableau is showing the change in total employment since February. And it's a pretty obvious reason we're choosing February, right? That was the last normal month of your life, probably. If you go back to February, you see in March, we had slight declines. The reason that March shows such a slight decline is because all of the data is based on the week of the 12th. And you may or may not remember this, but the shutdown really started about the week of the 16th, a little bit later. So, so you see the United States as a whole is this blue line here. The United States in a single month lost about 15% of its jobs. We used to tell this story, you've probably seen the chart before. We used to tell the story that Vermont didn't fall as far as most other states, but grew back more slowly. Sort of, we had some sort of more stable economy than the rest of the country, which, by the way, was never really true, but it made for a nice story to tell. But you can see that Vermont fell much further. Vermont lost about 22% of its jobs instead of 15%. That's in large part not due to that's not something endemic to Vermonters or the economy. It's primarily an industry problem. Losses were concentrated in things like accommodations and food services, leisure and hospitality. We have a lot more of that. So when the nation loses a lot of leisure and hospitality jobs, we lose a lot. We actually also have a much bigger base of manufacturing than most other states do relative to our overall economy, and manufacturing got hit very hard. So Vermont saw some significant losses. And you can see that over the months, April, May, we gained some of them back. June, July. We're going to release August tomorrow. This is like an uncomfortable time to do a presentation. Excuse me, because I know because we have tomorrow's data, we can't talk about it yet. But what you see here, you can either look at this optimistically, you can say, look, we are bouncing back. Or if you want the glass to be half empty, you can see that, first of all, we are still well below where we were. We are still 11% below where we were. And I think the troubling part is that the rate of growth at which we're gaining those back is declining. So if we had if we're on the trajectory between April and May of going from 21%, 22% to 15%, well, you gain 7% each time, points each time, you're back in 3 months. But that's not what's happening. As happens in all economic recoveries, as the recovery gains steam, the rate of increase in jobs slows down. And we're already starting to see that, and that is what I think gives us pause. And you can see that in the change by industry. Hold on. Growth by industry, that's what I wanted. So I'm going to remove a couple things here, total private and total government. So this chart is the change in total payroll in employment, basically, since the pandemic started. So you go February, March, this is what we were just looking at. April, you're down 21.7. As bad as that might look, if you look at leisure and hospitality, so in a second here, leisure and hospitality will appear as a line here. You can see leisure and hospitality lost 60% of its jobs in April of this year, and it started gaining them back, but it is still at 45%. It's still down 45%, and that rate of increase has already started tapering off dramatically. Part of this is, when the epidemiologists finally tell us that we can fully reopen, some of these jobs are going to come back, but in a lot of cases, the jobs can't come back if the company's not there to rehire. And we are going to lose, we have lost, and we will continue to lose a lot of firms in this industry due to the pandemic. And in time, it's easy to say that in time, those businesses will be replaced. Somebody else will open a restaurant. Somebody else will come along and fill that void. But that takes a long time. It's much more quick if I'm just picking somebody random here. If Lucy has a company, that laid some workers off, it's much quicker for her to rehire some workers than it is for an unassociated person, Adam in this case. Adam comes along and says, well, Lucy had a great business. I'm going to replace that business since she lost it during the pandemic. That takes a lot of time to build up that business. So there's some concern that this tapering off is going to be, that the recovery is going to be slowed by this tapering off, which is caused by businesses being lost. You can add manufacturing.
Yeah. This is Adam. So is there, and maybe this is outside of your wheelhouse presentation at least, but maybe for further conversation with everybody here is, so the actualization of jobs. So Vermont is really good at starting businesses, but not so good at that job actualization within the businesses. And that's a national trend that's been occurring over 10 or 15 years, maybe associated with tax laws, creating incentives for LLCs without jobs. But nonetheless, is there a way in which this group or other groups could start to advocate for policies that would help in the actualization of jobs, and not so much on small mom and pop, no employee kind of sole proprietors, but really try to encourage entrepreneurs and folks to design their business as they go to open them with the intent for employment?
Yeah, so that, Alex, Adam, that's a really good question. That is, you're probably tired of hearing me say this, but that's outside of my realm. That's a really important policy conversation to have. And in my role in the Labor Market Information Division, our job is to provide the data for other people to build policy around. I will say that, broadly speaking, and this is as close as I'm going to get to directly answering that, but we have a fascination in Vermont, more so than most states, I think, and definitely more so than most states, with the idea of small businesses. And small businesses are obviously critical and important, but the best small businesses are the ones that become big businesses and hire a lot of people. And we need policies in place that help people make that transition. You know, the mom and pop store that has 7 employees is great. And it's an important service for the town. It's obviously critical for the 7 people it hires. What's greater than that is that same store having 20 employees and being a little bit larger, right? So that's the balance. And I think as much as we want to encourage small business in Vermont, what we really want to do is encourage small businesses with an opportunity to grow. But that's a policy thing. That's an incentive, policy incentive that the legislature and policymakers can, and the Adam Grinholds of the world actually can tackle.
Well, thanks for dancing close to that. Appreciate
it. Yes. So I'm gonna, just for kicks here real quick, stick manufacturing on here because manufacturing got hit very hard as well. You can see the orange line here is manufacturing. Construction got hit very hard. And you can see, please don't, if you're looking at this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, look at that, construction's going down. I rarely say this about our data, but things have been so wild over the past few months that trying to sussing out over long-term trends we can still do, but looking at month-to-month changes in a single series is really not, you will make yourself sick at night if you clicked on all these series and started to look at month-to-month changes. I don't want to give too much away, but suffice to say that this construction number will look better by tomorrow when you see those numbers. If you're the kind of person who goes to our website and starts clicking the button, there's nobody who does that. But
Kevin, can you also show trade, warehousing, and utilities, because that's also some work that we've been doing.
Here, let me take some of the stuff off so it's a little clearer. Oh shoot.
So wherever, I'm not sure where, like CDL drivers, I know, but we have, that's some of research that we've been doing locally on that.
Yep. So trade, transportation, utilities, actually, yep. And then transportation, warehousing, and utilities, which is a subset. But in both cases, the green arrow here and the brown one, you've seen declines, not as bad as the state as a whole, not as bad as the total non-farm though, which is, total non-farm is just total employment. There's a, we don't include farms, but anyway. Any questions about this series before we? So the other series that, oh, actually, let me go back to the slideshow real quick and share this slide, because this is how concentrated the losses were. If you look May to May, accommodations and food services lost 18,500 jobs. Retail trade was down almost 8,000. You're probably all aware of this, but one of the more bizarre things is that healthcare lost thousands of jobs. In the midst of a pandemic, because of hospital staffing and moving away from any sort of elective activity, healthcare lost thousands of jobs in the middle of a, obviously, health-driven pandemic. Accommodations and food services were down 56%, arts, entertainment, and rec. And if you combine accommodation and food service and arts, entertainment, and rec, you get leisure and hospitality, which explains why that one is down so much. And then construction lost about 4,000 jobs over the year, which is, all of this is just putting language behind the screens we were just looking at. The next thing I will share with you is a quick tableau of labor force. And that is this one. So this is Windham County, and this bar down here is the unemployment rate. You can see we used to spend, whoops. Yeah. Let me remove, oh shoot, it reset itself. I'm sorry, let me just get this set real quick. Counties. Windham County. And year. Okay, I don't know why the unemployment rate chart is not coming up. The unemployment rate, this chart makes it look like the unemployment rate has not gone up, and trust me when I say it has. We can look at the actual data over here. Back in March, it was 3%. February was 2.4. It went to 3%. It peaked at 17.6%. It's as of July, it's down to about 10. You can probably expect it to go a little bit lower than that. But what's really shocking and amazing, and maybe not that shocking in light of everything that's happened, is that the number of unemployed people has gone from a few hundred to a few thousand over such a short period of time. And this is, this was a policy decision. It was this, unlike most recessions, like we used to talk about 2008, 2007, 2008, 2009 as the worst recession since the Great Depression. But that was not intentional. That was a financial crisis that bled out into the broader markets. In this case, we did something we've never done before. We did a little bit of it in 1918, but the data from 1918 is terrible. So, but we did this on purpose. And so trying to understand what a rebound from that looks like, there's no historical precedent, which makes our jobs hard because typically we can say, well, here's what recoveries look like. They take about this amount of time. When these industries are hit the hardest, it takes about this amount of time. We just don't know this time around because we don't know what that rebound is going to look like. And it's very hard on a monthly basis, especially in a state as small as Vermont, to get really solid data about the changes. These models, excuse me, these models we use to project labor force and unemployment rates. Excuse me, one second. Man. Anyway, these models are typically very good at estimating small changes on a monthly basis and on an annual basis. They were not designed to handle what happens if the government intentionally shuts the entire economy down. So the best estimates we have are that the unemployment rate in Windham County is now at about 10%, and there's a couple thousand unemployed people. But we don't, that's about as close as we can get to being affirmative about that. By the way, if you're ever looking for this data yourself, all I did to do this is go to vtlmi.info, click on unemployment, and this screen will come up, and you can pick seasonally adjusted or not seasonally adjusted. You can pick whether you want it at the town level, which unless you have a really good reason to want town level data, you don't want town level data because the sample is so small. Sometimes grants request it, so then you can use it and the grantees can decide for themselves whether it's worthwhile. But you can do about county, labor market area, town. You can pick the years. This series goes back to 1976, so if you're just really curious what it looked like over all these years, here's what Windham County has looked like as it loads. Except it's not loading. Well, maybe you'll have better luck than I did this morning. Typically this loads. Any questions about all of this before I'm going to stop sharing that for a second before I move on to my last little bit. Any questions about all of that? So the last piece I have here is just a discussion of where we think we're headed, which is to say we don't have a whole lot to offer yet, but if I play this from current slide and, oh wait, that's not sharing my screen. Let me share my screen one more time back to the presentation itself. So when we look out into the future. What we really see is a lot of uncertainty. So then the question becomes, well, okay, what drivers do you look at to try to, what's creating all this uncertainty? Which metrics can we look at? The first one that always comes to mind is consumer sentiment. Consumer sentiment is released every month, and the biggest driver of our economy is consumption, and consumer sentiment drives consumption. If people are afraid, they don't spend money. If people are feeling good about the world, they spend money. So consumer sentiment is a big part of it. Government response. Is the government going to step in again with another stimulus package? Or are they going to look at the data and decide they don't need to? So that plays a big part in it. And if we're not going to get more government intervention in terms of programs like PPP, are we going to have more business failures? Because as we were talking about earlier, in the long run, the services being provided by businesses now, in the long run, those services will be provided again. The question is if in the short run they'll be provided again. And the way to prevent the loss of those is to protect businesses from failures. And that's not always the most popular thing in the world as a political stand. The stimulus package, which we already talked about, all of these are critical to understanding what the recovery might look like, but none of them can really be predicted without understanding the spread of the disease. And that's why we need epidemiologists to help us make decisions to reopen in a safe manner so that we don't have to shut back down again and end up where we left off. 3 final thoughts, and then I will certainly take any questions you might have. As I said a minute ago, there's just too many unknowns. So in the short run, the best we can say is that the economy is starting to grow again, but the pace of that growth is starting to taper, which is concerning. But one thing that will always hold true in the secular long term is that skills are what drive people's individual employment. And the skills that people need in a job don't change so rapidly that coming out of this recession, we're going to need a whole new skill set. You're going to hear, because it happens every recession, you're going to hear people start to talk about a skills gap, and the problem is that people don't have the skills. But that situation hasn't changed during the pandemic. Whatever skills people needed before the pandemic, they're probably going to need afterwards. There will probably be a little bit of a shakeup in terms of the occupational makeup of jobs, but not enough to change the basic fact that what drives people's labor market outcomes in large part is the skills they bring to the table. And one thing we do a lot at the Department of Labor right now is encouraging people that while you are in this situation, while you're unemployed, while you're out of work, now is a great time to build on those skills. And we have opportunities to help people do that. And finally, as we've always said, more information leads to better decisions. Better data leads to better decisions. And we repeat that over and over, and I'm never quite sure if we repeat that over and over because we believe it to be true, I think it is true, but also because we're the ones who provide that better data. So it helps keep us employed. And finally, when you're done here, if you're thinking, wow, I would sure like to talk bad about Kevin, or if you want to say something nice, you can always go to our website. There's a little banner up in the upper right-hand corner, help us serve you better, complete the customer survey. You can give feedback there. And I will share a copy of all of this with Alex later. See, now I come back on the screen and I see about half of you seem intent and about half of you are falling asleep, which is better than my students usually do, so congratulations. Class is shorter as well. Any questions people have or anything you would like me to address?
Hi, Kevin. This is Christine.
Hi, Christine.
I am the general manager of the Mover, which is now both the Wilmington division and the Rockingham division, which used to be the current. We provide public transportation, paratransit, non-emergency medical rides in Windsor and Windham County. And my question or concern, or I don't know if this is your realm, we have an older population that does our driving. We generally have people that are retired school bus drivers or semi-retired, moved here, like in the Wilmington area, they've moved here from other locations and they just want to work seasonally. And so with this pandemic, we've lost probably 25% of our drivers because of concerns. It's a health concern for them. Even though we offer safety precautions and everything else. Our struggle is always trying to recruit, but what's more troublesome to me is that we have a 10% unemployment rate, and we've had postings all over the place, and we can't even get people to apply to jobs. So, you know, we're willing to start people in a non-CDL realm and train them. And so we're actually willing to give them a skill. We take the risk. We do lose probably 2 to 3 drivers every year that we train, younger people we train, and then they go elsewhere because they've got this great skill now. And we take that risk, and we're fine with that because we'll always call upon them at some point. We treat our employees really, I hope Adam can speak to that. We treat our employees really, really well. We try to offer them as much as we can for benefits and vacation and all that kind of stuff. So I guess the question would be, you have this huge unemployment rate, but there's jobs available, and how do you get people to actually apply to them?
Yeah, so
we're offering a really good, and we're not a shabby starting pay. I mean, we're a CDL driver starts at 17. We're paying a hazard pay of $3 an hour. So if someone's making $20 an hour, we can't even get people to apply.
So I'm gonna, Cindy Delgado raised her hand, and that makes me happy because I'd like, Cindy works in workforce development, and their job is actually directly related to what you're talking about. So if you don't mind, Cindy, would you mind?
I don't mind at all. So thank you. Thank you, Kevin, for your great presentation. I'd like to say that on the flip side of Kevin's, while that's the, the actual, the reality of where we're at, I look at that information and I think there's possibility in that. And the Workforce Development Division is definitely the Pied Piper of possibility. We have a virtual hiring event that the state has stood up. It's every Thursday at 11 o'clock. And so a direct actionable plan I can do is send you information on how to get those jobs into that, as well as our Vermont job links. But to speak to that whole message, it's really about digging in deeply in all of us who do workforce development to continue to create those pathways between those who are looking for work and those who have job opportunities. I totally recognize the frustrations that employers have now. They're similar to the ones we had pre-COVID. They're amplified now because you do have work and you hear that there's people looking for work. So how do we make that connection? So it's being intentional about that bridge building. I totally support also the process of stabilizing folks as they're coming into the job force, ascertain what's the best next step for them. I strongly support training and upskilling people to that best next step. And just, I think it's just a matter of connecting the dots and be able to create that pipeline. So I will connect back with you, Christine, and anybody else on this call who needs connectivity to those virtual hiring events.
Yeah, I think I had an email back in July about that, and I thought I responded to the email, but I'm not 100% sure if I responded either correctly or if it actually followed through. Because then now that you say the virtual, I remember something in July. I didn't realize it was every week. Yeah. So it's possible that there's something lingering out there, and it just hasn't. I haven't made the connection either. So I would be definitely very interested in that.
Yeah, so I think what you're referring to, I know that you folks are listed on the Virtual Career Expo page, which is something we're running, which any employer can submit their information. And we've been pushing out all of those organizations that have job openings on social media and other digital marketing. And that's a longer term, I'd say a little more passive kind of recruitment, where these bi-weeklies are usually just a few employers who are highlighted. But I'm going to put a few points into the chat about, that I think that, hoping to focus on, and it's less about marketing, because I think we could all scratch our heads for days about how to really market the job openings. and really look at what has changed. So there's certain things that haven't really changed, like, you know, the vacancies in a lot of our existing industries were vacancies in the past, and they're vacancies now. And what I want to kind of have folks think about is how have the demographics changed of the people we're marketing to? Well, how have their needs changed, perhaps? And also, what are we training them towards? You know, what is our workforce infrastructure? How has it been developed and geared towards certain kinds of jobs? So a good example is, would we still promote a job training program for hospitality and service industry jobs in Windham County? So, you know, because that used to be a really accessible career path for a lot of folks. Now we know that I think we've lost, we're at like 45%, you know, down in those careers in that industry. And so that both means that there are less available jobs, and probably there's more competition for those jobs. So the question we have now is, where do we spend our few resources and time training the people to get into which careers? And so that's, I'm looking, just managing the chat. Yeah. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping, you know, we can all like start thinking about. You know, we used to look at demand numbers to start these conversations. That's how we've been doing this over the years. Here are the highest demand jobs. We're changing a little bit to say, where are people coming from a bit more? What careers were they in that no longer exist? And also, what are the more resilient industries that we know will be hiring still when folks are either feeling safe to re-enter the workforce or things reopen?
CDL drivers.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
Alex,
we have a presentation.
And can I just add real quick? Part of the struggle is that, unlike the last recession, which sort of started at construction and then also in finance, this recession has hit hardest on the jobs that require the least specialized skills, which tends to be leisure and hospitality. So the least specialized skills mean that people have the hardest time returning to the labor force because they don't have a specialized set of skills that other industries are seeking. It is a challenge. One of the weird impacts of this recession has been average hourly wages going up significantly. And that's the only reason that's happening. The only reason that's happening is because not all, 56% in this case, of low-wage earners have just been washed out of the market. So that drives the average wage up, which that is no way to drive up average wages. But yeah.
So I think something that we usually expect is the market to solve a supply and demand issue. And what we're seeing right now, and it's still early, but we have a supply of unemployed hospitality workers, and we have an unmet demand of CDL. And there's always some roadblocks to getting into CDL. So, you know, we're really focusing through a demand study we'll be issuing shortly on lowering just ongoing roadblocks, but then we have COVID roadblocks in addition. But we have to shine a spotlight on this, and we will be reaching out to partners on today's call to really help shine the spotlight on the fact that the system is not working. We are not moving people from low skill hospitality to easily access training for CDL. That is a livable wage with benefits. It's portable, it's stackable. AI is not coming to take the truck driver in Vermont anytime soon. You know, that may be long haul stuff, but we're safe here. And this can be something that can also be wrapped around going to CCV classes or doing something else. You can flex your schedule. And so it's really something that we want to help highlight and put the spotlight on that says, sometimes we do have to step in and force the market to react. And this seems to be one of those instances.
Yeah, Adam, I will give you one success story we had. We had a young man who actually grew up in Wilmington, moved to Bennington because he was having a hard time affording Wilmington, moved to Bennington, was going to CCV classes for computer programming or engineering. Really nice kid, came and applied for a seasonal position last winter. And I always give the people the speech in Wilmington that say, you know, we tell you that we don't guarantee anything after April, but there's always something. We have labor, we have this, we have that. We might get you 20 hours or something. And just by the deck of the cards falling in the right way, and this kid is just a phenomenal worker. He showed up every day over that mountain in the winter for a 7 a.m. start. He ended up becoming, he's a full-time. He works 40 hours a week. If there's 2 or 3 hours that he's not driving, he's working on our tech support. And he's a young kid. And now he's looking to move back into our area. He's looking to move back to Wilmington because he wants to be closer to work. He can afford it. So there is success stories out there. It's just, I said to him, if I could clone you like times 10, we'd be golden. But, you know, so there is, so that's what we want to, that's really what we want to see, because it kind of helps everybody all in all the realms. And here's a kid who's got a skill for life. He might move on to computers, but he's always got something that he can do.
Yeah, there's absolutely, I think, you know, something that you said reminded me of what Kevin said about the skills of yesterday are the skills of tomorrow. And so one thing I want to be clear about is that we're not talking about new curricula or changing the way, or the skills that we've assumed or the trainings that we love and support. And I think Susie Wagner really hit the nail on the head in the chat, is that how we deliver these trainings and how we make them accessible to folks has new benefits. It's remote, you can access them. It has new barriers, which is online learning isn't equitably accessible to everyone. And then there are the externalities, which childcare business is business infrastructure, and that piece of, you know, infrastructure isn't functioning right now. And so there are barriers that need to be solved outside of this work that we know must be, you know, addressed. But I think what I want to do in transitioning to some presentation about the data that Christy's been working with is that there shouldn't be any surprises about the training opportunities or what kinds of jobs are available. I think it's really reminding us that now we know where to continue to steer the newly unemployed, and to look at these trainings and what accessibility means through a slightly different lens in some ways. I'm gonna see if, just want to check my notes to see if anything else. I mean, I will say, yeah, and Lee is, you know, friendly reminding us that some organizations have invested in distributed online learning well before they had to. And so leaning into some of the organizations that have this infrastructure, especially when resources are tight, is going to be one of the, you know, solutions that we have really. And the other thing I want to acknowledge is that many folks put in just the new policies and regulations of getting folks into work, and the safety regulations and the need and all of those changes. And even though what work looks like has been turned on its head, you know, temperature checks and masks, we're still talking about following directions. We're still talking about, you know, reading comprehension. You know, to need a mask at work now is the same as many manufacturers insisting you wear gloves or insisting you wear glasses. And so it's the culture of safety is something we still need folks to be prepared to have experience with. And so even though the world has changed, again, the skills really haven't. It's, can you show up safe to work is still a #1 priority. It's just that list, that checklist has gotten quite a bit longer. So if there's other questions about this data specifically, I do want to move into sharing some updates on data we've collected, again, so that when we all go home and think, where are we encouraging folks towards? What industry sectors provide opportunity or represent opportunity in our communities, this is really, I think, one of the places to start.
Alex, I just wanted to make a mention, as we're thinking about the work that we're doing, we've been used to thinking about it on a smaller scale because our unemployment rate had been so low that just to be mindful of the volume of people that we're going to be looking to serve as they come off of the unemployment rolls, and to be cognizant of any trainings or any kind of opportunities and bridges to those trainings that we create, that we're prepared to both get that messaging out to all those folks and then to be able to serve them. And that's a bigger lift than maybe we're all used to doing down here, because we have had such significant low unemployment down here.
Yeah, agreed. Everyone wants scale until we've got it, and now we're gonna have to learn how best to manage that. Great. So unless there's other folks who have something to chime in, I do want to turn it over to our newest team member, Christy, here at the BDCC. She is our newest Vista. If you'll recall, ages ago, Gabriel, who is our previous Vista, presented some hiring needs assessment. We are just thrilled to have Christy here continuing that work and other work. So yeah, please go ahead when you're ready. If you can share, I think you can share your screen.
Thanks for introducing me. Yes, I'm Christy. I'm the new Vista. So I'll be talking about the two most recent hiring needs assessments that BDCC created a report on. So first, I'll share my screen. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah, sweet. So first, I'll just give a little summary of what the hiring needs assessment is, just in case we forgot, and also to make sure that I know what it is now that I'm doing it. So the hiring needs assessment is an in-depth look into an occupational sector. So we pick different ones and we really, really dive deep and ask employers what their needs are. And this is the point of the hiring needs assessment, is to get real-time labor demand in the Windham region, because as we saw, the state level data is very nice and it tells us a lot of things, but it doesn't tell us that much about the specific demands in our region. Basically what labor demand is a measurement of jobs, and that's whether or not they are filled. So it's not only those who are employed, but also the positions that the employers wish to have fulfilled, but they are not. And because the hiring needs assessment is a survey, we can ask very specific questions about what skills the employer needs from prospective employees, and also about their projected future demand currently and in 1 to 5 years. With these different questions, then we can assess the workforce training opportunities available here and the ones that are needed, and kind of bridge that gap. So to talk about different data. So what are the different questions that we can answer with some different data? So the state level data, this is very broad, but basically we can answer who is unemployed and who is employed, and for both of those, in what jobs. So what occupations are those people employed in, and which occupations do those people leave? While the hiring needs assessment tells us what jobs are available regardless of whether they are filled. So this is a question of how many positions are currently employed and how many positions are open. What skills are needed for people to occupy these positions. So employers' needs for their prospective employees. What trainings exist in the region for people to start a new career, so young adults, or also people who are looking to switch careers, which is also kind of what we're talking about now due to the pandemic. And knowing what skills are needed for people to occupy these positions, and the trainings that exist currently for those people who are unemployed, that really, really helps tune the local pathways into these careers that have a prospective future. So I'm gonna go into the production and manufacturing hiring needs assessment first, and then talk about the CDL certified hiring needs assessment. So for the production and manufacturing, we chose 131 employers for the survey and 35 responded. Out of those 35, they employed a total of 1,174 personnel, which is about 50% of the workforce in the production and manufacturing sector, which is an amazing response rate for a survey. So out of those 1,174, 753 of those are specific production and manufacturing positions. So when we asked them what positions they are looking to hire currently and in the next 1 to 5 years, we see that currently they are looking to hire 59 positions, out of which 27 are entry-level positions. So that's about 40% of the open positions are entry-level. And as we see in 1 year, that just really grows, and then in 5 years, that's 166 entry-level positions. This chart also shows that it's not only the entry-level positions, but that in 1 to 5 years and currently, there are positions open for more experienced employees. So that means that if someone's hired today, in 5 years, they can get one of those supervisor 5+ years experience position, because we see that there will be openings, or there are projected openings in those areas. So looking back at the respondents of the survey, we said about 50% of the workforce is represented in the survey. So if we need 305 positions, we might be needing to help them fill 305 positions over the next 5 years for just 50% of the workforce. When we double that and extrapolate the number of positions open over the next 5 years, we can say that we could double that to get 100% of the workforce, and that would be about 600 jobs in Windham County area over the next 5 years in production and manufacturing alone. So that means that we will need to work to turn those, or tune those pathways into the production and manufacturing if we want these jobs to be filled, or positions to be filled. When we created the survey or sent it out for the first time, the pandemic had not happened. So halfway through, we also sent a COVID supplemental survey. And that was kind of to assess the impacts in the production manufacturing due to COVID. And out of those 35, 14 responded. 2 of them said that they actually expanded their business during the COVID pandemic. And 8 say they were start rehiring in July, which was up to 22 positions that they would be rehiring. So this just really shows the resilience of the production and manufacturing sector, and more reason to tune the trainings and the pathway into this occupational sector. So now I'm going to move to the CDL driver or certified. When we did the CDL hiring needs assessment, we chose 40 employers for the survey and the garage foreman of each Windham region municipality. So 18 people, or 18 employers responded to the survey, and they employ a total of 76 CDL personnel. So when we asked them the same question of what is your current demand, and how do you see, like, how many positions you're going to be needing to fill in the next 1 to 5 years, they answered in a similar way that currently they have a demand of 11. This is pre-COVID again. And in 5 years, they're gonna need to fill 78 positions, which is more than they currently have. Currently, they only have 76 positions filled, and in 5 years, we might need to help them fill over 100% of the positions that they currently have. So if CDL certified drivers are kind of hard, like it's hard to find an occupational sector that has them, because they can be hired for many different jobs, many different types of sectors can have a CDL certified driver. So if we add the non-respondents of the people that we tried to survey but didn't respond, and those that we didn't include because we didn't know that they had CDL certified drivers, plus our geographical context of being in the tri-state area, having some of the largest employers of CDL certified personnel, then we could estimate the actual demand to be 3 to 4 times more than we actually said, or that we found in our survey. So when we look at their COVID-19 supplement of the impacts, 3 of the employers said that they actually were busier but have the same or fewer staff. And so this can be an issue if those positions go unfilled for too long, then they will no longer be asking people to come fill those positions, and we don't want that to happen. 7 said that they need positions filled to return for business as usual. And that is both due to COVID, people being scared for health reasons or retiring early, and also positions that were not filled before the pandemic and still need to be filled. Also, one last thing for the CDL drivers is that to get a CDL driver, they need to have a license. But there were some DMV closures starting in March that have really clogged the pipeline. People can't get the licenses, therefore they cannot get the jobs that need a license. But slowly they have been opening it back up and people are able to take the test. But a lot of people that were ready to take the exam to get a license were held back because of these closures. But as we can see, also the CDL positions are very resilient to COVID. They just have some more blocks, more steps for licensing. And yeah, that's the data. Yeah, so that's my presentation, I guess.
Great. Thanks so much, Christy. That was some great information. And I think as Adam mentioned, we're working on the barriers to the CDL licensing and illuminating the constricting of that pipeline. But I think, one of the takeaways we were hoping from this meeting was that, the work we've been doing on manufacturing pipelines, that a lot of us have been working on for years, that, is still work we can, chug along with and keep promoting the folks who will be enrolling in those programs and how they enroll and where those programs exist. That may all be changing, how they pay for it, who's paying for it, who knows what will change around that kind of landscape. But those are still the pathways we want to be investing in. Along with CDL drivers, we have a training provider in Bellows Falls or Westminster area who is ready to go, so long as the DMV is open and they have folks ready for those licenses. So that's kind of, something we're hoping to focus on more until conditions change.
So Alex, I will give you a little hint because I've been pushing V-Trans pretty much every time I talk to them because I'm like, you got to change things in Vermont. But just so everybody on this call is aware, for CDLs in Vermont, and it's not as bad in New Hampshire, but in Vermont, so we'll have drivers come to us that are semi-retired, over-the-road truckers, and they decide they want to just drive a bus 30 hours a week and make some extra cash. CDLs are very endorsement based, so you can have somebody that has a Class A CDL that can drive a dump truck that cannot drive a bus with passengers because they don't have a passenger endorsement. And the state of Vermont makes that person start from scratch. They have to go take the general knowledge permit test. They have to take the passenger endorsement permit test. And they have to wait and you have to make an appointment to get that test. Then you have to wait 2 weeks before you can make a skills test appointment. Then you get the skills test. Then you got to be ready with that bus. You got to drive the bus there. You got to pass that. Then you get your CDL. So in a non-COVID and non-closed down DMV situation, it's a solid 6 to 8 weeks. In this situation, we have drivers that we're trying to upgrade in Wilmington. They've been driving forever, but we just want to upgrade their air brakes. they finally got a test. They had to go to Rutland to take the test, and they're waiting for their skills test. And I think it's in Rutland, but because there was only 3 DMVs open and Rutland was the closest one, it took that long. So they did open the CDL because we pushed that too. He's like, we need CDL drivers and DMV's not allowing those tests. They reopened that in, I want to say late July, early August. So there's been some progress, but I've talked to many people in the economic development and business community and VTrans and said, I think their theory is that, they've never carried a passenger, so they have to learn that piece. And I understand that, but I don't think they have to start from scratch. My opinion is they should be able to start with just the passenger piece and move forward. And so we've had drivers come to us and they're like a Class A CDL, and we tell them what they have to do, and they go, ooh, yeah, I'm good. And they'll go to New Hampshire, and New Hampshire, if they live on the border, and New Hampshire does it like that. They just take the passenger and move them forward. So that's a huge roadblock, and that's at the state level. So I don't know if you guys have any help there, because I've been preaching it for over a year, going, please just streamline this. But that is a huge challenge for drivers. So there are, and CDLs are very, you can have, I can't even imagine, I think there's like 10 endorsements. So you can deliver propane and have a hazmat, but you can't deliver people. So it's this kind of weird challenge. So just keep that in mind when you're talking to up or there. Just explain to them they need to stop that. That would help us a lot.
I'll just do a real brief update, Christine. We have raised this flag to Agency of Commerce and Community Development, who's liaisoned us with Commissioner Manoli from DMV to try to start to understand the normal barriers as well as the COVID barriers and see what can be done. This is also an issue, statewide for the Workforce Development Board, the retraining. So everybody on this call who's bumped into this before, certainly you living in this world, and so many employers who you might not think of as being driven by CDL licensure, it really does impact so many different businesses. So hopefully a good group coming together to address some policy issues as well.
Well, Thank you. Keep it up.
And I think you also brought up another point subtly, is that the time, the considerations we always take about training and is it worth it and should I do it, are real decisions based on people's real lives. And to tell someone after being unemployed for 5 months, yeah, wait 6 to 8 weeks maybe until you can drive an hour and 45 minutes to maybe pass your test, or here's a 4-year apprenticeship program that you can start now. Those solutions are even maybe less exciting or accessible to folks who, again, have been unemployed on unemployment benefits for 5 months, because we know that historically, folks, we were hoping we would both see unemployed folks in training, but also people transitioning careers was also a big thing about upward mobility. But now we know that less people have the luxury to wait for that right opportunity, and they'll take the work that is most accessible to them. And if that means it's 6 to 8 weeks to be a CDL, or you can just show up somewhere else for something you may not really want to do, how are we incentivizing or disincentivizing folks finding good solutions for themselves, not just, what's readily available now?
I will say, to speak to that, because we do understand that it takes so long to get a CDL, that when we hire non-CDL drivers, we have a handful of routes that are non-CDL, so they can drive them. And we do pay them during their training. So we'll hire them at like $1 an hour less, but we'll encourage them to come and learn the routes and ride the buses and train and learn the policies and learn the procedures and read the books. And we'll pay them through all of that. We offer them accessibility to our driver's room that has a computer. So if they're in an area that doesn't have a lot of internet access, they can take practice tests online. There's a lot of companies out there that give free practice tests, so it kind of gives them the skill set to understand what's going to happen when they walk. Because a lot of people have had their license for 50 years. Last time when I went to get my CDL, I was terrified. It's like I haven't done this in a long time. So we do try to do exactly that and try to incentivize them to start right away and at least start making a paycheck. And we have had drivers that we've left in the non-CDL routes because they failed the first time. We didn't let them go. We just said, all right, we'll just work on what you failed and we'll get you there. So we do try to do that. Unfortunately, we only have a handful of non-CDL routes. So, I can only hire so many non-CDLs at a time until they become CDL drivers. But we do that because we know it is such a long process, and it's a long process when it's not COVID. So it's really long now. So we do get that.
Thanks. We're just about out of time. I want to provide maybe Adam just a quick second update on other data initiatives we're exploring, or statewide work that might be happening.
Yeah, sure. So for some time, we've been pursuing getting some data tools that we can use in communicating with businesses, communicating and doing some research with potential business relocations, and have narrowed down to a company that we've really done a lot of engagement with. We've socialized that through state agencies, through the state colleges, through the state workforce board. So I'm hopeful that there's going to be some partnership around one of these commercial products. It can be used by so many different people. The question is who pays for it, and then who gets to access it. So Kevin, I'm hopeful that Dustin is going to be building a bit of a team to talk about maybe what kind of data tools you folks would like to see that's outside of the traditional federal. It's more of a private model. The one that we're most close to is EMSI. So it serves a bunch of different sectors. So our vision, RDC's applied Vermont, applied to Northern Border Regional Commission to I think it was about $50,000 for 2 years worth of access to this. And we envision that we would have 2 licensures in 2 different shops of the RDCs, and that people could then send requests to those shops to get reports and data out of those shops. Regrettably, that was not funded. So we're back at it, trying to find partners who would be interested. But it's an expensive tool, and it's not a tool that any one shop can really justify. But hopefully we'll be building consensus around the state and then giving all of the regional partners access through 1 or 2 different entities to kind of get that data that can really supplement the VMLI data that we just saw today.
Adam, have you spoke with ACCD about that? I presume you have. Yeah. Don't they have a license, or they had one?
No, they were actually tagging into ours for a bit, that we had sort of a freebie at it for a while as we were trying to shop it around.
Okay.
Yeah.
We used some of that data in a different report we did. And okay.
Yeah. And then if they're working with like Camoin or any other national economic development group, these national groups, of course, have access to it. But yeah, so stay tuned. We'll see if we can get access to that tool. I think everyone on this call would find value in it. So we may also look for support if we see a chink in the armor somewhere. We'll try to put as much pressure on that as we can.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, and again, I think the takeaway is that there's a lot of data, a lot of numbers about unemployment, happening, and it feels pretty overwhelming when we look at the big picture of the economy. But again, if we can focus in on what opportunities are available for specific folks in our county, and then, the school year just started. So if we think about, these are the opportunities we're preparing our current high school seniors for. These are the opportunities that we have a few months to get folks trained for before winter, when people start hunkering down and making longer term plans there. And so I think, just moving forward, keeping some of these, bright spots in our minds, but also doing what we do and coming together and seeing, okay, here's a training for manufacturing or for CDL. How do we, you know, come together and promote those opportunities for the most amount of people? So I think that's what I know I'll be working on and what we're working on with CDL and manufacturing stuff. But yeah, always open to collaborate more. And if anyone has questions about any of the data, feel free to ask. I'll send out these presentations and these documents. Hopefully see you folks soon.
Yeah, the full hiring needs assessment reports are available on our website under publications. So.
And special thanks to Kevin again for, at least I don't need to say for making the trip all the way down from Montpelier, right, or Burlington, but we're still grateful for your time.
Thanks, everybody. It was good talking to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.